This meeting is being recorded.
Well, this might be like the most excited I've ever felt at the beginning of a podcast episode, I think. Here we are. It is nearly May. I'm recording this for May 2022. And this is the podcast where I get to speak to the illustrator of our new Grow Free animation. The animation I remember starting as little ideas coming into my head way like back, I think sort of 2018. My daughter had been born. I don't think the name Grow Free it was kind of coming up around that time. Yeah, it was the end of 2018-19. It was coming up. I was working with another podcast guest, Vicky Rebecca, and we were creating a course, and all of this awareness was coming in about just how trauma has affected not just my life, but I could see the patterns then, what happens in trauma, the way it disconnects us, the way it makes us go more rigid and we get tunnel vision and focused. And instead of, flowing and creating into our lives, we get stuck on repeat. And it was becoming quite visual for me in my mind. And the implications, the fact that, oh my goodness, right, this just isn't affecting me, or this just isn't affecting a few people who've experienced kind of significant trauma. This is global, this is cultural, this is collective. And wanting to share this with the world and show how much waste we're creating, how much we're defending against problems that might not actually be there is going on. And I think it was 2019, I stood up in front of a cafe audience in Aberdeen, where I live, and made a small pitch to a small kind of community crowdfunding at that point. And so I was doing this speech about what I was trying to create, and people came up afterwards and they were like, I really loved it. I don't quite get it, I really loved it. And it was just a bit too kind of embryonic still at that point for people to buy in. But since then we've got some funding, and I knew that what I wanted to come out wasn't going to come out of me. I've tried. I got the felt pens out, I got the crayons out, the pencils, and it was nothing like. I had no idea then where it would go, but in my imagination it was beautiful and amazing. And come in 2020, the pandemic's on. We're all kind of working out what's happening. We're not so able to work. We have a bit more time in the background to get involved in our creative stuff. And I did a course in children in permaculture and met Lina. Now, Lina, help me pronounce your last name so I definitely get it right.
Kusaite.
We were both doing a children in permaculture course, because permaculture has been part of not just the trauma training, but getting more involved in permaculture and recognizing more and more what's going on in nature and our the way we've disconnected from it. And Lina was there, and I'm going to let Lina introduce herself and some of the projects being involved in, but she shared some of the illustrations projects she's done with children in permaculture. And I got some funding just around that time and was like, oh, I know who I'm going to go to start working on this animation finally. So Lina, before we go into anything about the animation, tell people a little bit about you. What brings you joy? What's important to you? And I'm interested also to know how, like, what was your childhood, your upbringing? How did you become an illustrator with this beautiful focus on nature? And
well, I'm sitting in a place where I became, or where I started. So it's my home in Kaunas in Lithuania. In a garden in the same house that I grew up in, and I have it here. And I'm looking at the trees that when I was tiny, we planted them. and now it's a big forest, so it's really a great place to kind of talk about this project. And your questions are kind of really to the point. So so I am from Lithuania. I grew up here in Kaunas, and I grew up in a family of a lot of creative people, and as well surrounded by nature. So my grandfather was an architect and professor, but also a lover of nature. So there is I think it's a family. It's in a family, the creation and natural surroundings. But at the time when I was surrounded by nature, and when I worked and helped my mom doing the garden, doing the yard, working with plants, it was very classical, basic way of understanding plants as not life things, is something that you need to control, you need to manage, especially if it's in a garden. Nevertheless, next to the love for it, it's always been there. Respect and love. I think it comes from the old, still old, beliefs about and respect about environment. So I think that I still have it from my mom and from my grandfather. Nevertheless,
still there. There was maybe still a managing relationship that's become more part of the modern world, but there was still an emotional
connection, understanding that without nature, how can you live? How can you live in a city on concrete? But the managing was a little bit old-fashioned, or the very classical, what we have now, decorative plants. To look at, it's more for the look. It looks pretty, and something about that we know better than plants. So I think I was coming up as that. You need to repeat your questions, because I will lose where I'm going further on.
Yeah, well, just you've pretty much that. What gives you joy? Just who are you? What's important to you? And how did you become an illustrator? And anything else about your journey into becoming where you are now?
Well, as I said, like, because the family was always in a creative, like my mom was architect, my dad was jewelry maker, my all uncles from my mom's side, my mom's brother, musician and architect, my father's 3 brothers, painters, woodcrafts. So it's a constant, creativity was constant surrounding with me, and we were very much encouraged to create all the time. And I remember when we were little, you have a journeys with my mom walking in the fields, and we always had to take something with us to draw, to collect, or to pick the plants, or to pick some skulls, or to pick some dead animals, I don't know, wherever organic. And this is how I got the joy of being in the nature. And not any nature, wild nature. So wild the better, because that's where you can, what I could feel now, when you can really sense when the nature is healthy. The wild nature is healthy, and that brings you way much joy than a very well managed nature. So being around, and now I'm in spring here, and it's everything coming up, the smells, the earth, the rot, the little rain, the bacteria, everything. It just makes my body alive again. I'm like, oh, it's a little bit like a compost for me.
Yeah,
it's a food, or the charging the batteries, definitely. And because I live majority of my time, I live in Brussels, and very dirty, very polluted, very city-like, which is totally opposite of what I have here in Lithuania, and it's very opposite of wild nature. So when I come back here, I literally want to dig my hands in soil to recharge it. So it's the energy that nature gives for me. It's something very rechargeable. So that's one side. And another side is creativity. So creating something, that's just something I don't know if I could do anything else, because I always did that. All my life I created something. Would it be drawing? Would it be building. As a child, I would use some natural parts from the plants and create some toys, or I would create some sceneries, and it's constant building, looking, combining, and making little paintings, little sculptures, little stuff. And give it to my mom as a gift, and that was always making joy for everyone. So then I went through the sorts of different art academies, learning basically art techniques and different forms of self-expression. At that time, I was not really aware of self-expression. I was aware of what I'm gonna be doing after. So long story short, the illustration came as a side thing. I always loved drawing, something that was at some point I was writing, but the hands for me is something through which I love self-expression. And for one or other reason, the lines for me is something very, it's like my signature, a line. And that's why I love pencil and paper and just drawing the lines. Something very strong.
We started speaking about, illustration and turning it into animation, and you would always come back to, but it's paper and pen, Emma, that's what it. And I studied anthropology, and one of the professors I studied with actually studied the kind of progression of human mark making in the line, and how that's changed over, from where calligraphy was this big movement, and it got smaller, and then as we got onto computers, it become like the connection between movement and perception, and it's all super fascinating.
I guess I think maybe it's even like a first human language, because drawing objects simple as a house, as a cat, as a tree, it's a language that everybody understands. It's a visual language that doesn't have a borders of cultural difference or geographical. So writing the letters is also some kind of drawing, but with a certain different rules of how to do it. But the drawing doesn't really have how to say the rules connected to the geographical point. I mean, the house, you can recognize everywhere houses. When you see, doesn't matter if the person from Africa draws or from South America or from Siberia. You will recognize the house, you will recognize the tree, you will recognize the fish. So it's one language that kind of connects us all. That's how I see it, at least, if I have to explain the drawings or where they're coming from.
And it's beautiful. I don't want to detour too much, but when we're so much of what the message of the animation is around how we get disconnected from our connection with nature, and a lot of that is around what we can call trauma or experience that felt too big, that we didn't digest. And technology and relationships are both two things that play a big part in that. So our technology can be really helpful, but it can also disconnect us. Our relationships can be really supportive, but they can also harm us. And one of the ways we want to move forward with the animation, is around almost reclaiming some of this technology and bringing it back, instead of digital technology being something that's quite distractive and
yet the animation is full speed digital. Exactly.
How do we reclaim this digital to become to re-embody us, to reconnect us? But that's for a bit later. We may get back onto that at the end of the podcast, or in the future, a bit further future, we'll see. But if we come back to like the message of the animation. Like one of my friends, Emma, I asked her some question a while back, and she was like, "Yeah, you're not one for small talk, are you, Emma?" And it was the same with this animation. It wasn't like I didn't come to Lina with a little question. Lina, can you draw a house or a cat for me, please? No. Can you draw the way in which everything is connected? Everything, Lina, everything. She was, would you be a bit clearer? And I'd start writing about it, and You know, it was like going from energy.
No,
and
but you remember when we had a discussion with after the permaculture course
with John
we had
Cree,
a talk with John, yeah, and you showed you draw yourself a little explanation how you saw the trauma happens
yeah,
within the child and how does explain. So you had a first very super simple technical drawing of, so for me to understand a little bit how it happens.
so
And
you
then we
got some
start
of that.
discussing from that point. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
at some point we talked, maybe you're gonna draw something because you explain and you draw, and then maybe I can kind of coordinate you what, how. But so it was a long discussion till we actually got to the point where it was clear or clearer, yeah, that I will be drawing and you need to write way more for me to understand what you mean by all the philosophy that stands behind it.
So you did ask to write. I asked
I
me to
asked
write way
you,
more
yeah,
because you did,
I
and
asked
you
you
then
to
got
write
like
it.
10 pages, I think, at least. I'm not sure you were like, oh God, I asked for that, didn't I? But that, I mean, it was because it's this big theme we were addressing in this
Yeah.
animation.
But for
I
me,
know
this is
for me,
how I illustrate. I illustrate the stories. I listen to what it is, and I really need to understand and get. It depends, of course, on the story, but that as complex as a philosophy that you're introducing, it's very complex. And I think writing it as a story or as you express yourself, that helps me. And of course not in the beginning, because when I remember I was reading it, it was like, what do you mean by that, what do you mean by that, what do you mean by that? And we had a number of conversations and talks and like, okay, if you say this, what that means, till I got what I wanted from you. I kind of a little bit molded you into the text that would help me to understand you.
yeah,
And an interesting thing is that when we talk, I do, and I have a feeling that we do get each other really clearly, and we think in the same patterns and in the same philosophy. And then it becomes in the written, because the writing, I guess, for you is like for me drawing, you have your own self-expressions and things start diverting and organically growing into something else, because that's how I draw. If I start drawing, and I usually never know what I start with. I start and then I see what comes up. So that organic matter that it just comes through me. So sometimes when people ask about this illustration and ask, can you do the sketch? I don't do sketches. I start and I let it happen. So whatever comes out of me, I have not always have idea.
okay.
It's challenging, depends on the client. How much do I let it go and be improvisational, and how much I trust myself that I'm gonna go and reach the goal that I need to, and how much I need to control it or do the sketches before, talk to the client. So it was, I think for both of us, was a very similar process of for you writing and for me understanding and drawing it.
Yeah, I mean, going through the process with you has been part of me getting clearer about what this message is and about what the program is in Grow Free. You know, I mean, anyone, if you've listened to other podcasts, you'll be getting the idea that Grow Free isn't an approach that is giving one set of tools. It's not an individual approach. It's almost like permaculture in a way that it's looked across all different approaches, all different indigenous techniques, whatever people are speaking about trauma and we're recovering, we've looked at that and we've distilled it down into some key steps. We open that up for people, and then we provide courses that bring in different approaches. So then people have the choice. Then it's not about saying this is the only way. It's about saying, actually, you could heal through almost anything you do if you understand why you're doing it
or feel it,
understand the process. It's about coming back into our body. It's about holding our feelings. So going through the process with you has definitely helped clarify you know, everything we're doing at Grow Free. So
Mhm.
I feel where we're at now is it has distilled into a much clearer essence, and the animation is a really wonderful representation already of where we're at. How I'm, you know, by the time that you started presenting your actual work to me, you were obviously distilling into the essence. You've had to make choices, like you said, like we were speaking about how everything is connected. You obviously couldn't draw everything in the world on one paper, but you've done it.
No.
Excuse my language. You made a damn good try at that, lady. You got, I was like, you'd show me stuff and I was like, wow, you got the galactic bit in there, and water and wave and energy, and how, like, tell us more then about how you move forward, whether you want to share images at this point or whether you're still like
maybe I can. Maybe then for whoever is listening could make sense to see something when I talk. This is also always easier, but then you have to let me share.
I think you're good to do that. We have Sahajo here, one of our community members. So Sahajo, do feel free to come in.
To ask the questions or just jump in.
Because you've been through this, you've been part of this journey of reading through the script, seeing the early images.
Anyone see the image?
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see you then, which is somehow strange. You there? So still, can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah. Wow, where did I start? It's so this is already quite far process of it's just one image of it's really it is so complex that it's even trying to find the sequence how I started is already difficult. I remember I was sitting and thinking, my God, how am I gonna show the cosmos, the waves, the sound, the pulsation, the human, the nature, the connection, the cells, in one illustration. It was really a challenging, but I love it. And it's something about that I did before one work, which I had to create alternatives. It was also, for me, a text, and not a text, the concept of the kind of underground theme for me about how do through creativity, for whatever I do, try to find a way for people to understand that the nature and the human, we are the same, and we're so connected that we don't really separate. We're not separate from the tree, we're not separate from the bird, from the insects, from the soil, from the water. We all a mishmash, one organic body. And to respect our outer layers, outer body is as important as to respect ourselves. And only then we can start healing, when we start understanding the connection and the unity within. So how do I illustrate that? It's a crazy thing. So of course the text that Emma created is really good to start with. And I knew that I wanted to do in a lot of layers, and layers that they introduce cosmos, that introduce the certain kind of maps of how a cosmos is expressed. So I did a lot of research on all sorts of imagery, starting from cosmos, how it's expressed, starting from looking into plant systems, I always try to look how we can see the patterns in the human body, in the human anatomy, the patterns that repeat in the nature. So through the patterning and through the similar forms, through the similar understanding, how can I express it, this illustration, and illustrate it. So I don't know how, is that so far clear what I'm speaking?
And for anyone that's not watching also the video of this at the moment, Lina's got up an image close to what appears in the animation with a fetus, a human fetus, and kind of superimposed gently within that is an even earlier stage of the embryo, which you described as, you know, you find out that like pretty much any embryo in any species, any animal starts the same, so that there's a repeating pattern in all different parts of nature.
It's you know, something that repeats. It's a circular system, something that's like a spiral circle. And then I was doing like, okay, how the cell looks like and how does it multiply, the forms of different graphics. And one cell creatures, they also exist. And like, for instance, even the pollen is a circular one cell creature. And how the embryo starts from the one cell, and there is a point where you can't really recognize too much, or if you don't know really very well anatomy, is it a fish? Is it a reptile? It is a human, or is it a bird? All embryos look very, very same, and then just later on they start changing and developing. Yeah. So I wanted to show all that, and through using the similar patterns, maybe I will show this one. Something like I don't know. This is so Emma, short technical question. People don't see what I'm talking now about.
Yeah, so some people will. They'll have the opportunity to watch it either on video or listen just on audio.
Okay. So see here I have one cell creature, which is it's a water animal. It's a one cell, and you can find them. It's an old drawing from the antique books, and I use them as like a starting point, not a cell that we are coming from as a humans, but a cell of another animal. So finding the similarity in the shapes and in the forms, and then behind you can see in already quite late stage embryo, you see different circular forms, which are a pollen from the different flowers, which I also found really beautiful, as they still have similarity. They still one cell creature, and they have little spikes, which is also very similar forms that the viruses and bacteria have. So I kind of start looking at and using the same shapes to create the center of the illustration composition as a starting point. And based on Emma's talk and Emma's stories, the uterus and the mother's womb, and how the blood capillaries are creating, I start also looking at an anatomy and different images of how the blood cells feed the child and takes from the mother, and what are the anatomy there. And I really found interesting that they look exactly like a mini trees. So I used that image, and I created my own trees as a blood veins,
yeah,
which is drawn. But here in the back, you see there is it's a seaweed plant, which also looks the same. So I was kind of combining and adding all the similarities in the nature or out of our human body, and trying to kind of combine and understand and show it how this whole understanding from one cell creature grows into plant communities, and then from the plant communities it's kind of merges within. And then I was thinking, okay, how do I expand further? Because this was a little bit pause in the illustration when I already showed to Emma, like, okay, this looks a little bit too plant-based, and we talk about cosmos, so how do I further go from here on? And then I thought I need the layer that represents earth, that represents mountains. I need the layer that represents water. And basically, these are the next level layers that I created to crystals, crystal form. So it's for me, it's representation underground and the ground and the soil. And then you see here, there is like a blobby thing. So it's a water. And as it's a part of, we are basically a water creatures, and everything has a, from 70 to 90% of water in all of our bodies, including plants and animals and fishes and the birds. So I created the layer of water, which the shape actually comes from neurons in the human brain, and their patterns in some levels are very, very similar to, I found it very similar to, like, if you see here, it's actually a lake. In some very old map, I look at the water shapes, so I copied them, and this is a neuron shape in the brain. And I thought, okay, but they are super similar, so let's create this water patterns, water splashes that are layer that represents a liquidity in all our, and that actually connects us big time with everything.
That's amazing, because even since you brought that element in, I've heard more about this understanding of plasma, plasma in the world, and how we're communicating through plasma all the time. And
yeah,
I just love that. If I can just pop in there, like, I love, and this is exactly what I was looking for, and you've found your way of bringing it in. I wouldn't have known, I wouldn't have imagined necessarily this manifestation, but from what I was thinking, I exactly wanted this. I wanted us to show how nature has certain patterns, like from this movement of energy that underlies everything, comes movements that become physical forms that express certain kinds of patterns. Branching is one of those patterns. Like you showed the capillaries around the womb,
yes, well,
being basically the same as when you, as a tree, the same as a seaweed, the same as you get in the lungs. So, you know.
Yeah, I wanted also to include, but it's like as we discuss later, like, yeah, there is such a potential to create even more. If you look at the rivers, the world rivers, and how they branch into the oceans, it's exactly the same. It's a capillary, it's a tree, it's a river branching out. They have the same patterns.
Yeah.
Of course, like, wow, I could make out of the capillary after the trees, I can make the rivers and coming out into the space, and just like, wow.
So this is how nature works. This is how energy behaves. This is how nature behaves. It flows, it forms branches, it forms spirals, it forms like honeycomb shapes and webbing. There's certain forms and patterns that repeat again and again within nature.
There are few number of patterns that are in repetition wherever you create, wherever it's created certain structures and flows and forms. And it's is it in our human body, or is it in the plants, or is it in the structure of the forest, or the mycelium, or the rocks, or even the cosmos, I can imagine.
And we'll come back to this a little bit when we start moving into then how you started to approach disconnection. But
I didn't prepare this connection image.
That's okay. We can get onto it. One of us can find it somewhere. But
okay.
Anything else in this connection? We've got the water layer and element. We've got the kind of sort of.
We have a cosmos. You can see here.
Yeah.
So it's a circular circles. It's a solar system that they took from Copernicus. How they were first realizing the different planets. So this is supposed to be sun, and then there's the Earth, and then there are other planets and other planets going around it. So I used it also that these, I love these old maps of sky, how people were looking at it and searching and understanding and trying to put it on the paper and to kind of put it mathematically so it can be readable. So I used that as well.
Yeah.
Here I used in this one, which we took it away, we didn't use. This is very ancient, I think it's 12th century, one of the first maps of like a solar system. So you have little, and I like it's a kind of childish drawn, very rough, very simplified, but yet very understandable, the thinking of the circle in the circle and the layers and going around is a little bit like a spiral animation. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just phenomenal. It's phenomenal what we've got in, and I mean, you've captured the brief amazingly to get all of that in. I don't want to put Sahajo on the spot or anything. Is there anything you'd like to say?
They're just amazing. I just want to pick them up, you know, and like really like turn them around and really look at them. You just get so lost in the images.
That's amazing that you say that.
I could just look at them forever. I can see them on a wall, like in a sequence, you know, and I would be in heaven looking at them. They're amazing.
Oh, well, that brings us totally into like so rather than go into how you manage to represent disconnection, which we will come back and touch on, and it's good probably that you don't have those images because we don't want to show everything in this podcast. You know, we want people to come back and watch the animation.
Okay.
But where we're actually, we've got to this point.
Sorry, can I switch off, or you want me to?
Yeah, switch off for now. We got to this point, and I don't know if there's ever really a complete stop point. Is there? There's always
no,
more you could do, more you'd want to do. And so there are ways that we want to develop this. But you know what Sahajo said there about she just wanted to turn it round and go around. That's actually what they're developing with the web app. They, I mean, not. Again, it will develop as well, but there will be a different way then to interact with this material, these illustrations, than just watching an animation.
Wow.
You'll be able to click in and literally have it coming at you, the different layers. I imagine at some point, you know, we'll get onto the technology where you can literally turn it round, go behind, you know, kind of say what.
Well, my wish for this one to. When you talk about it's so many different things, and when we talk about that we as the humans are part of nature and all patterns are the same, and we simply, I do believe that some people feel that and are that, but our human belief system is too separate from the nature. We somehow feel very superior, and I guess I talk about Western world more as a culture. And my idea is to, even now in the illustration, I still see too separate. The baby is too clear, is too dominant for me at this stage. And with a full respect to your philosophy, trying to talk about human trauma, so it's clear. But what I see would be even better is to, it's like when you go into the forest and it's so full of stuff. In the beginning, you don't recognize what is what. It's just it's a mishmash of patterns, of colors, of shades, of forms, of smells, of everything. And then when you start focusing, you suddenly start realizing, this is the leaf of that plant. This is a butterfly. This is an insect. No, this is not an insect. That's a fruit. So you need to stop to start recognizing. But if you come in as a first impulse, there is no recognition of what it is. It's a bit of losing the knowledge of who we are to rediscover what it's possible, where we could be if we would not call ourselves humans. Yeah. And I think that's what I want to do with illustration, to kind of, I will say very roughly, explode the human body into the organic world where you don't really know, because the patterns are so similar. You don't know, is it a blood vessel, or is it a river, or is it a tree? You don't know if it's a cell or the virus or the pollen.
Yeah.
And we don't need to know, because we all have that in our bodies.
Yeah. You've reminded me of another conversation I was listening to, and actually given me an idea. So I think we need you in Scotland for this idea, at least for a
Okay,
few
I'm coming.
months.
I've never been there, so
Yeah. Well, Madeline, who did the sound, she's also up for coming over. So maybe it would be amazing to get everyone together at one time.
Yeah.
But I was listening to a podcast between two people who'd done a fair amount of plant medicine journeys. So whether it's ayahuasca or different psychedelic, and for both of them had visions come up during those ceremonies or experiences of what you're describing there, almost like the obliteration, but in a very almost a kind of gruesome, like the internal body of the human, getting spilt out and splurted out. That kind of disillusion of everything, which is almost, to get to that proper point of being able to let go of the knowledge and the flagstones that we've put in, almost to kind of give us a bit of security, and completely let go to this absolute open experience. It does require letting go, and it requires an ability to not judge something as good or bad. Or
I think when what's beautiful in drawing or illustration for me is that you can draw the same ugliness in such a beautiful way that it's really hard to hate it, or it's hard to judge it as a negative.
Well, that's the alchemy of what you do with art, isn't it? That's the alchemy of whether it's song or dance. It's taking those feelings that come up when we feel terrified or disgust or repulsed or just annoyed, and fully allowing them to the point that they come back into beauty and into joy, which is the nux of healing trauma. And I guess that's, if we speak now about, so the animation and the illustration was looking to represent how everything is connected, and then also to try to represent how we shift out of that knowing, that state, that connection with everything.
Yeah, I think it's also the part of disconnecting, part of which I also it's a lot way more work to show how real disconnection works. I think in a part that the way I create it now, it's still too. I can imagine it's for people. It can be still too connected and too pretty to say, oh, yeah, what's wrong with that image? I am very happy to be part of it as well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really show the real harshness or real consequence of disconnection from nature.
I think where we didn't get, I love it. I absolutely love exactly where we're at with this animation. Absolutely love it. I love the way the connection, it moves into, it does separate into layers. And yet I know both of us would like to go further into what happens to the patterns when we get disconnected. What happens to that flowing branches?
It's still too round.
And that's something for me from the beginning was like, well, how do we end up with human cultures that have got hierarchies? If you look at like any organizational chart of institutions,
that's a perfect visual.
Straight lines or these graphs. We've spoken at times about graphs that become so abstract. We're trying to distill this beautiful complexity into something super manageable. We turn the natural workings of water into sterilized plumbing systems with,
I guess in this way it's way easier for people, because I guess it's a notion of understand and control. Because when you put something in a square, you can put one square next to another, and you can control it so it stays.
Yeah. I'm going to say this
quietly. The square out of the circle it's not going to run down. It's going to be stable. And if you put a circle, it's going to run down.
Yeah, you can't. So you can't pin it down.
No.
Let me say this quietly because my husband's upstairs. But my husband, he's getting more organic. But we'd drive past a house and it would have straight fencing, absolutely immaculately straight, and he'd be like, "Oh, that's amazing, that's beautiful," and I'd be like, "What?" Yeah, but that it is because it's manageable, it's engineerable, it's
It's a control thing.
and I guess in a way there's that separation almost of the masculine and feminine, the feminine ability to hold flow and
Yeah, I guess it's I think it's just maybe something it's the same what you talked about technology and organic illustration and how the at least the animation, which is technology and which helped us to create this the movement of drawing and stuff. The combination, which I'm personally constantly in a fight with. Though talking about that, living in very, very industrial, big, dirty, concrete full city with the squares and houses and very little plants and using computer to talk. So we do use the technology a lot. And I guess maybe what it bothers me is it's a lack and it's a constant decreasing and declining of organic creativity, of trust and intuition, and more focusing on the control systems, distant systems through technology control. And that's where we lose the organic gut intuition feelings. And so I guess I'm not against that technology. I'm fear in losing that balance that both has equal space for it.
yeah.
And what I'm seeing recently, it's not that much organic space has anymore.
It's not so
Organic,
balanced. But then if we go back to what you were saying about you know, the being able to represent the blood and the guts and the whatever through art, and it's still beautiful. Like it's holding this moment in time, well, this moment where we're at and seeing this technology and seeing where we're at without getting freaked out by it, seeing the trauma in the world, looking at it and transmuting it. And that's what I feel we're part of that movement with this small project of seeing, technology is amazing, nature's amazing, and yet there are things happening at the moment with this technology that have been unconscious and unwise. It is having an impact of disconnection, and yet it doesn't have to. And
no,
bringing it
it's
back and showing. And I'm just going to put a little plug in at this point. We're going to launch the animation shortly in May, and hopefully alongside, if not just a wee bit after, we'll be launching a crowdfunding to bring in more money to develop the illustration further, to develop the web app, to create some technology here that is about reconnecting us. It's about it'll be a technology that allows different practitioners to put their voiceover onto our animation and share perspectives and share the intimacy and the gruesomeness and the inner worlds of our own trauma journeys, our own healing. Because the more we hear the inner worlds of someone else, the less gruesome and shameful our own feels, the more we can let it out and bring it up, and the more it can be transmuted into something beautiful and joyous, which is exactly what we're doing in the Grow Free community. We're sharing our inner worlds with each other, and it is becoming beautiful. There is alchemy here in community, and I see it in lots of different places.
Yeah, true.
This is part of my vision for where we're going. So if you're listening to this podcast, look out afterwards for the link to the crowdfunding. Give us some money. Help us let Lina do some more illustration, and the animation team and the web design team get techie, bring it back together into something beautiful. We've had this has been an amazing conversation already. Ladies, anything you'd like to say as we're moving towards
maybe one of our guests, if she's still there,
to
join us and to ask a question or observation.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't actually have any questions, I would just love to see the animation again. You know, I think that's the thing. It really just draws you in. And I think when I watch it, there are no questions because it all just totally makes sense. And whether it's because of the background that I've had in it or not, I'm not too sure. But yeah, it's like, gosh, that's just the way it is.
Well, that's so amazing to hear, because it was like what we wanted to create was something that we speak about activation in the Grow Free approach, about remembrance being activated within us, or certain qualities. Lina, at the beginning, you spoke about being surrounded by a creative family, and almost by osmosis, you had creativity activated in you because it was around you.
Yeah.
And what we wanted with this animation was something that not would perhaps put some words and some explanation, but which also activated a sense of what we were looking to convey here, a sense of connection. And I think your illustration combined with the sound track by Madeline and the way the animation works. I mean, to hear you say that, Sahajo, means like, oh, ding, ding. We got there.
Yeah.
It also would be interesting to, because the voiceover, the little story behind it, it also kind of directs to how you listen and watch the animation. And I would be very curious to hear from people who never seen it. Just watch the animation and music, movement and visual, and to get their perspective. What do they see, and how do they? What comes up for them?
Yeah, that would be
really interesting
thing to do. Yeah, to play it once with, once without, and that will hopefully that will be a choice within the web app. Yes, I'm going to listen to this voiceover or that voiceover. No, I'm just going to listen without anything. I've seen one sort of prototype version of what they're aiming to get in this first version of the web app, and there is that opportunity. Yeah, it opens so many doors, doesn't it?
So many doors. Yeah. Yeah.
And as a resource in peer support, I think it has the potential to be super supportive, because it gives a bit of curation, a bit of a framework for people to share their experience, the dark side of their experience, their process of recovery, the feeling of connection. So it gives a framework and a bit of curation to us sharing our experience, hearing that from others, sharing our own in a safe way. It's not just people, sharing the darkness with no way out. No, it's here you go. Put a voice to the darkness. Also put a voice to the healing and the practice. So then it allows some intimacy and sharing in a safely curated way.
Will there be the opportunity for prints to be done on the various images? Because imagine having that connection with everything in a big poster on your wall. Imagine that.
Well, I've been imagining
that's such a connection.
Yes.
Because then when you look at that, when you're disconnected or in a dark place, you're like, oh, look where I've been, look where I can come back to.
Yeah. Exactly. I've been imagining it like properly printed onto a whole wall in the house.
Yeah.
But what you're saying there is another really, that's a resource. We'll need, there's obviously lots of practicalities and technicalities, behind the scenes of discussing some of this stuff, but you've just got me, you've ignited a few more ideas with those comments, Saj. Well, I kind of feel like we've touched on everything I wanted us to cover in this conversation. If you're listening to this and you've not seen the animation, get over to their YouTube channel. We'll put links below. I'm not going to say them out loud now because we may open a new channel. I'm not sure. Come and have a look. Find out about the crowdfunding. find out about the community. It's free to join the main space. There are paid areas to help us resource what we're doing. We are working with other organizations to get fully funded places, because there are plenty of people coming in for whom having the resources to buy into some of this support just isn't an option at the moment. There's lots of ways to get involved, lots of ways. And if you're listening to this, if anything awoke in you, come find us, check us out. We're a lovely bunch, and we've got a lot to offer. And we'll leave it there, ladies. Thank you for a beautiful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.